for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, let's start with the public portion of the meeting. All right. Jeff Lester, you want to speak to us?
What do I have?
To the podium, please.
Understanding that there's supposed to be a vote tonight on opening of the soft shell clamming in town waters, and also the issuing of a limited amount of powering permits. I am a Lester, and I never really got into the family business until just recently, actually. I was in the supermarket business, and I know it's a dying thing, Bayman. And I found out that after all these years, I enjoy it. And I have an 89-year-old father that thinks he can still do it, but he needs a lot of help. So that's why I have my permits, and so I can help him work to make money. Also for him, and also to supplement my income, which has decreased because the business I work on is sold to corporate business, and they don't issue any overtime. So I'm just hoping that the committee, the trustees, are planning on opening the town waters for clamming. Is the vote supposed to be this evening on that, or who has information on that?
We'll be discussing a resolution.
You're going to be discussing, okay. Basically, that's all there is, so I'll stay for the meeting and see what happens. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Rick Whalen. Laura, you'll be next. Okay.
I have an application on something.
Okay, if you can wait, if you want, you can wait.
I'd love to go.
After Rick.
Sorry, Lori. Actually, I have a handout for you, so let me, map, easy to read. I colored it up myself, very fancy drawing. Like I said, we're not going too high-tech here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I'm here on behalf of a couple from East Hampton who own a vacant lot up in the Sag Harbor Woods area, as I call it, north of Birch's Path and west of Sixwell Highway. And they're here tonight, Steve and Mary Lloyd, sitting back there. Steve and Mary bought this property, which is yellow. It's the yellow 7.1 acre parcel on the map. The other colors that are on there, just so you understand, are the blue lines are old woods roads that still exist in that area of the Sag Harbor Woods. And we're talking here just to, so people get oriented. We're north of Merchants Path, west of Sixwell Highway, south of Sag Harbor Village, the Sag Harbor Village boundary, and east of Town Line Road. The town already owns, and that's what you're seeing in green, most of the green area. There's a little bit further to the south, but still north of Merchants Path, but that comprises around 236 acres of land. So the town has I call it the Sag Harbor Woodblock Preserve, and it's a very significant area with a pretty extensive trail system. Again, those trails are kind of old woods roads. They're not all still drivable today necessarily, but they were at one point in time. In 1990, Steve and Mary bought the lot that you see in yellow on that map. And they did so shortly after the trustees in 1988 had taken a quitclaim deed from the then owner of the property just north of the Lloyd lot. That's a 71.9 acre tract of land. Today, it's town parkland. The town bought it in 2001, but in 1988, a group of developers who had taken out a purchase money mortgage on it gave the trustees a quitclaim deed over roads on that map. In 1990, Steve and Mary entered into contract and then bought their property in the understanding that they would have access over the trustee roads. That was a condition of their contract. They were advised by their attorney that they, could get such access. They got a policy of title insurance that ensured their access to the public road. The seller represented, basically guaranteed in the contract, that the property would have public access, and so they bought the property. The actual access easement from the trustees was not executed until April of 1992. But in April of 1992, they actually had an access easement from the trustees. And essentially, that access easement was over the shortest stretch of blue that you can see that would go out to Six Pole Highway to their east. Actually, at that time, the trustees still owned all of Six Pole Highway and all of Merchant's Path, most of which today are town roads. There was a road improvement district done in the mid to late 1990s that put that into town hands. But at the time, the trustees owned all of Six Pole Highway, all of Merchant's Path. And so the access easement to the Lloyds actually went all the way out. If you read the description, which is extremely long, it goes all the way out to Sag Harbor Turnpike at the entrance to Merchant's Path. So what happened thereafter was that the people who had given the quitclaim deed to the trustees, as I said, they had given back a mortgage. They had given a mortgage to the original owner of the property. Well, the owner of that property then foreclosed upon the mortgage. The trustees were actually named in that action, so the trustees knew no later than 1991, actually 1990, that there was an action of foreclosure. Nonetheless, the trustees did give an easement to the Lloyds in April of 1992. The property was foreclosed upon in October or November of 1992. And because there was never a release of the mortgage premises, in other words, when the quitclaim deed was given, there was never a release from the guy who held the mortgagee. And so when he foreclosed the mortgage, at least the way the law looks at things, he took back everything that he had sold. He had back everything sold, including the quitclaim deeds that he gave to the trustees. The issue, therefore, really comes down to this. Is the trustees' ownership of the roads reliant upon the quitclaim deed, which is all, after all, is a deed that says, if I own it, here it is, here's your interest, or do the trustees have an ownership interest that goes and predates that? It's pretty clear that the trustees' position at the time, and I think you've reaffirmed it since then, but not so much formally, is that your ownership rights go back before the quitclaim deed, and they're not dependent upon the quitclaim deed. That is important today because what I'm trying to achieve here is Steve and Mary have owned the property now for 30 years. It's basically their retirement. And they need to be able to sell it. They right now, on the face of things, have a landlocked property. That's not what they bargained for, but that's where they are at the moment. They don't have an action against the title company. This is 30 years ago. The property, when they purchased it, was they paid considerably less at the time, $65,000 back in those days, than the property would be worth today as a 7.1 acre, buildable parcel in the middle of parkland. They also don't have any recourse against the guy who sold it to them, who was a former attorney from Southampton. He passed away in 2011. So even though in his contract he stipulated or guaranteed, represented that they had a public access, he's gone from the scene. There's no recourse against him. What I am trying to do is basically have a three-corner deal. The Lloyds are willing to sell the property to the town of East Hampton. That would add to the town's 236-acre preserve, and you can see that their property extends about halfway into that green space between Six Pole Highway and Town Line Road. So it would be, and the town owns land on three sides of their property. So it would be in the town's interest, and I'm a proponent of open space, so I believe it's in the public interest, if the town is able to acquire the Lloyd property. The problem is, in all of my conversations with the town director of land management, he has said consistently that unless we can show a legal means of access to a public road, And he doesn't see it, at the moment, he doesn't accept anything because we don't have any formal statement from the trustees, and he knows that the quitclaim deed was erased in the 1992 foreclosure action. The town will not appraise the property as anything other than landlocked land. And as you might imagine, if it's landlocked, it's worth quite a bit less than if it has an access. So I did write to you in December of 2018. I think you actually had a discussion, I believe, but I don't really know that I get anything really formally in writing in support. But basically, what I'm looking for is for the trustees to reaffirm that you own the roads in that area. As you can see, almost all the roads, I mean, that's why I gave the map, the roads predominantly go through preserved public land today. With a few relatively minor exceptions, they don't run through, private property. Obviously, it might be difficult to get easements over the private land today or quitclaim deeds from those private landowners. Most of the woods roads exist, they're on public land.
Rick, I'm sorry, is the blue an actual road?
Blue are the dirt roads. Those are the actual roads or trails.
Road?
They trustee roads.
Right.
Well, this,
In the 1980s, this was the basis. The trustees were essentially claiming that they owned that network of roads.
Have they been challenged on that?
No, there was never any challenge. They actually got some of the, it's a little hard to see on the tax map through there, but further south towards Merchants Path, there are actually roads that were quitclaimed to the trustees and that were not erased. Do you see those toward the bottom there? Bottom center, you see it says trustees of the town of East Hampton. So there were some quitclaim deeds to the trustees at that time period around 1990 that were never eradicated or erased in a foreclosure action. But the property in the center, if you can read it, in the center of this map in the green, it says 13.7, and it says 71.9 acres, that you can read that, or 71.5. Not sure you can read it, above town of East Hampton, kind of dead center in the green. That 71.5 acre parcel, that's really where the issue lies. That's where the quitclaim deeds were given to the trustees in 1988. That's where they were foreclosed and erased in the foreclosure action in 1992.
I have a question. What road did they think they had access?
Right, let me if I can, I'll hold it up and I'll show you. This is 6 Mile Highway, I didn't color 6 Mile Highway.
Right.
That's an open paved road, all right? Towards the northern end, well, all the section that we're concerned about is paved. Eventually it becomes dirt much further down by the Jewish cemetery.
Yeah.
But it's paved to where this blue road turns off.
Right.
And the access easement, this is the actual access easement that the Lloyds got from the trustees, ran from Sag Harbor Turnpike along Merchants Path, up 6 Mile Highway, then followed this blue, and then down into the top of the north side of the Lloyd property.
What's the orange?
The orange, I'm just trying to highlight, that is land that's still residentially privately owned.
And, okay.
So the bulk of the property here is, as you say, it's open space, town owned.
So has there been any discussion about getting an easement through the private property, right?
Some of them have been granted, if I can still hold this up, I wish it was larger, my apologies. Between the Lloyd property and the property in front of Lloyd, I didn't mention this, but when the Lloyds got an access easement, got the access easement from the trustees, they also gave the trustees some land, about 2/6 of an acre, that would continue that road to the south. At the same time, the person in front of them, who at the time was John Leonard, also gave some land. So the Lloyds actually gave the trustees a parcel of land in exchange for the access easement. That continues southward. There is a subdivision, it was a John Leonard subdivision, I can't remember the name of it, it was Chelsea Woods or one of those, where there are 2 trustee roads that were preserved through the planning process, through there, and then further south, closer to Merchants Path, there are again trustee roads that were quitclaim deed. There are 2 properties in between that are, they're really mostly in white on here, that are owned by members of the Shearer family. There, I'm not sure you're going to get a quitclaim deed or an access easement. It runs through their property, and they have houses on those lots already.
But by granting a easement, access easement, do we relinquish ownership?
No,
So, and the fact that the town is buying it, I don't have a problem with it.
Excuse me, Rick. One of the lots in white that you alluded to earlier has a trustee road going through it. Is that one of the?
Right, that one is that's one of the shear lots. There is no access easement or deed through there, but to the south, you can see there is.
Right, but is that a continuation of the trustee road?
It's the trail, it's where the trail runs.
Right.
It's where the Woods Road runs.
Right, but it is a trustee road?
Well, the trustees would presumably have been, arguing in 1980 that it was.
Right.
I'm not sure you'll be able to get affirmation of that from those landowners today, but.
Well, we'd have to go back and do historic research on it.
Right, and see whether you have rights there.
So really, Rick, if I understand this right, the properties in orange to the south of this, is that a subdivision? Are there roads or anything through that that are shown on?
Some of it is a subdivision, yes. There's a subdivision called Merchant's Path. Literally,
Okay.
that's the name of the
Yeah,
subdivision.
all right.
And the trustee roads, I don't show you all of the map, you can see it's kind of right off to the south, but there were trustee roads that were created or were affirmed by deed at that time.
No, what I'm asking is there a paved road in
No,
here?
common driveway.
It's a common
The
driveway.
orange sliver is a common driveway?
When you say it's a common driveway, are these flag lots with 20-foot flags out to Six-Pole Highway?
Well, let me just show you actually,
It looks like that
Wait.
orange goes to the backside of those shear lots.
one of the lots uses, this lot here uses the trustee road in blue, and I presume they have an access easement from you, but they use it for driveway access. The remainder of the trustee roads over here, again, they go off the map, are either unopened, they all more or less have trails on them.
The orange on the
Only
backside.
one of them is used for
What
driveway.
I'm talking about is this one here.
Oh, sorry, there is a common driveway easement that crosses through.
Right.
There are 4 lots, and there's a common driveway that serves all 4.
And there's a sliver of county
Coming from
land there
Six Mile
too?
Highway.
What's the sliver of county land? It's-
That's, that was another unknown owner property, that's owned by the county. They picked it up as unknown owner property, I
Okay,
believe.
just a sliver.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other orange sliver that says it's private, I'm not sure, that used to be unknown owner
Is
too.
this lot vacant?
No, there's a house on that. We have tried to get access through that property from the neighbor, but they haven't been willing to do it voluntarily.
Rick, assume for argument's sake that we weren't claiming any ownership predating the quitclaim deed. If we did not, just for argument's sake,
Right.
and that quitclaim deed was erased when the foreclosure happened, who then would also have a claim to ownership of this property other than us?
If you had no claims, if you could not base your claim on anything but the quitclaim deed.
Correct.
Then you would have no ownership, and that land would just be, today it's now owned by the town. There are 2 kinds of trustee roads, and just bear this in mind. I'm not going to tell you how to choose and, what to do if you want to reaffirm your claims here. But in the town records refer to, there's the more traditional roads, which the trustees always owned in fee title, and you will see them on the tax maps. There's a separate kind of road called the passing highway. The trustees did lay out and retain passing highways through land that they allotted. What were passing highways? They were basically trustee easements, where the trustees didn't necessarily have fee title, but they still had the right of passage, which they retained for the public's use.
Could they convey that?
You could convey an easement. They retained the passing roads to allow the public to use it for access. So yes, I believe you can convey an easement over a passing road.
And Rick, maybe you can give the trustees a little more color on what exactly it is you're asking of the trustees.
So that is a very good point. What I'd really like you to do at the end of the day is in some formal way, I have to go back and to the town and see if the town will agree that we have access sufficient for them to do an appraisal that allows us to reach a meeting of the minds. If the town will appraise the property as landlocked, then we have a problem, because they can never meet what we need to sell it for. And if that happens, we're going to go to Plan B, which, the Lloyds really don't want to have to do, and that's some form of litigation to break our way out through
Yeah, but
probably
your
private land
title
in front of us.
insurance company should pick up the tab on that. Why not?
It was their obligation is the $65,000 that we paid at that time. I don't know that they're going to affirmatively go out and sue somebody if we were, I mean, that's a live issue, and we've talked about it internally, but.
Okay, so let's, for argument's sake, we assign an easement to you
Well, let me,
over this passing highway.
you already have done that.
Already have.
You already did that, you did that in 1992. You
Okay,
wanna give that
but we,
access.
but we give that. Is that challenged in any way?
No.
And what's the problem?
The problem is that the town is not currently recognizing it because they say that your right to give the easement expired when the quitclaim deed was wiped out in the 1992 foreclosure action. So what I'm asking you to do, because Chris is asking, well, what am I looking for? I would be looking for, something in writing, but to be honest with you, preferably a resolution rather than simply a letter.
Does that mean the town doesn't recognize the fact that we own these roads other
Correct.
than by the quitclaim deed?
Yes. Yeah,
He's
they-
asking for a reaffirmation that these, the trustees own the road, under Dongan or otherwise, prior to the quitclaim deed. So even though that quitclaim deed got erased, we still own the property anyway.
What would
With
make,
Dongan Pat.
what would make the town believe that now if they don't believe that then, if they don't believe it now?
Here's what I'm banking on. This is be straightforward here. In order for the town to buy the property from us and us to sell to them, we have to reach a fair price. That means they have to come up with an appraisal, and that appraisal, to be anywhere that we would accept, has to presume access. My hope is that if the trustees assert a claim of ownership of the roads, that the town will be indisposed to contest that they will accept that, and they will base their appraisal upon your stated ownership of the road. If they don't, then we're going to have to fight our way out some other way, and if we do that,
Rick, I think it
We're not selling to the
I
town.
personally, I think it would be in both of our interests to do exactly what you're asking, because we can assert the fact right now, here's a very good reason to assert our ownership again on this road and see if the town challenges it.
Rick spent a lot of time on this issue. It's a relatively complex, very unique issue, and I don't think there's very much exposure to the trustees by going ahead and reasserting that we do own these roads. And I would say that it would probably be the right thing to do.
Chris, you
did the
think this is something that
trustees
requires
assert that
more
at the
research, or do you
time?
think this is something that we?
Something first, because
they did in the early 1990s, but I don't know that they took any, when the foreclosure action occurred, I don't know that the trustees actually did anything, after the foreclosure action. They just sort of.
But I mean, prior to accepting the quitclaim deed, did they assert their ownership of these roads?
No, not to my knowledge.
Oh,
Not to my
of course they did. They were used for
did.
cutting firewood and other things for years.
Right, but I don't know of any formal way in which the trustees
I'm
claimed.
sorry, there's a letter that Rick found in the file, that when the trustees were asked, did you own the road or not, the clerk assigned it to the roads committee, Mrs. Hulse. So it came in like a question to you, and the clerk assigned it to the trustee road committee before the quitclaim deed, and the road committee, in the file, said that, yes, this
I
is
forgot,
our road.
Arlene is right.
Yes,
That we referred
it's
to
in,
the roads
it's in
committee
the file you
internally
put together, Rick.
before the quitclaim deed
What's
was accepted.
interesting is,
So it seems like it's been done.
Excuse me, John, I was calling. The effort, to get a quitclaim deed to avoid this type of confusion actually ended up perhaps causing more confusion.
If they got a release from the mortgagee at the time of the quitclaim deed, none of this would have come up. They should have got the mortgagee to agree to the quitclaim deed.
Right.
But they never did, and so when he foreclosed, because the guys we sold to weren't paying him,
Right.
he took back the entire property.
But he couldn't take back something he didn't own.
And that's the issue. So he was able to erase the quitclaim deed because the quitclaim deed was given by the guys, the mortgagors, to the trustees. If the trustees already owned the road before then you are right, he cannot take that back. And that's what I'm basically asking you to reassert.
Do you have any other supporting documents to that?
The support, I think I gave you copies of the quitclaim deed. You have the quitclaim deed in 1988. From
I don't have,
SB
I don't have it. I
Okay.
don't, that hasn't been distributed.
Not distributed, Jim?
No.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's in the files.
we have one.
It's in the files.
I think it went to the roads committee.
Oh, didn't go to everybody, I'm sorry. But yeah, there's a quitclaim deed from 1988 from SPB Development, Inc. to the town trustees. There's a 1992 access easement from the trustees to Stephen Mary Lloyd, and there was a deed from Stephen Mary Lloyd back to the trustees
Jim, that
for the part of the road that's on their land, it was on their land.
Have you talked to the town about the fact that the trustees, prior to receiving the quitclaim deed, did assert their ownership of this road?
All of my dealings with Chan are going through Scott Wilson, who's the Director of Land Management. I don't go above him, or at least I haven't. So, Scott's position is you got, all he sees is you had a quitclaim deed in 1988. He doesn't see anything else. He knows the quitclaim deed was eliminated in the foreclosure action, so he says, I can't have an appraisal that shows access.
So he didn't see that minutes or whatever.
I don't think I've shown that to Scott Wilson, no.
Just,
There is correspondence in the trustee file back in the 90s.
87 probably.
Yeah,
87.
80s, 90s.
I mean, it seems to me that what we're being asked to do has already been done.
Yeah, we just have to reassert it.
I think we just have to reassert our ownership, just like anything else.
It's all been done now almost 30 years ago, so, I mean, if I'm going to hope to get anywhere with the town, I think I need, a fresh claim by you that says, yes, we still believe these are our roads, and therefore our access easement is valid.
I mean,
And
I would say
that would be
that
talking about all the roads involved.
I mean, obviously, our concern is the one that affects us, but, you can draw the net, throw the net as wide as you want to.
Well, I think the benefit.
All that green land, sorry, Jim, except for one narrow parcel owned by the, it's all town land. All the green is town, so.
Well, my feeling on this is if we're going to assert our ownership or our rights here, I don't think we can be selective in it. I think it probably would be better to assert our rights over all of it, and they can get the benefit of the portion that serves their needs,
Well,
and
just
hopefully they get to a resolution of it.
I mean, realistically, that's what I presume you do. It's clear from the 1988 deed action, if you saw the quitclaim deed, and I don't have the document here, it might have been, that was distributed to the roads committee. The roads, the quitclaim deed were going off onto the other property, so.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing I look at here, is if the quitclaim deed got erased as part of that foreclosure proceeding, forget that. Go back to what Susan said earlier. If this was owned by the trustees beforehand and it was contiguous, it's not just the section that passed through both of these properties, then claim ownership to the whole thing. And if it flies for their appraisals, well, it sets some precedents and puts our foot in the door to hold on to this, to the access through these properties.
I think
So I think
doing it for.
And it gives you a say going forward,
Serves
public
both
park
our-
land, it'll
We
serves
did
both our needs.
It provides public access.
we had that issue here at Six Pole with the Hanks property, this one little spit here.
Right.
We asserted our ownership there when he wanted to
well, how does that,
encroach on the trustee road.
All right.
how does that
Move forward
affect,
with this.
how does that affect the blue areas that go through private property that doesn't recognize our right?
Well, the town is not going to challenge us on those conveyances through private property. If they're going to challenge us, they're only going to challenge us on the properties that they own. And this is going to be one of those things. It's like a tree falling in the forest. The portions that we're laying claim to that run through these private properties, unless there's some action on their properties that brings this to light, I don't think you're going to hear anything from anybody.
It's really a parcel by parcel examination.
Yeah.
And really, this
really haven't
pertains to parcels that are
been dealing with Our
dealing with the
roads
town
used Anyway.
right now.
Does it have a name in any of the research you've done? Does that particular road have any type of name?
The westernmost road, which actually ran south of Merchant's Path, and there's a section south of Merchant's Path that actually came into play in the mid-1980s, and the trustees did put in a claim there, and they did get a quick claim deed in part, and not in part, was called Hezekiah Jennings Path. So, that's the only one, that would be the one that goes on the western side, the north-south road that goes up into, I guess, into the Suffolk County Water Authority property, Hezekiah Jennings Path.
What's the next
Guys,
move
I'll,
on this?
I'll review the file. I don't think that there's too much more research that really needs to be done. It's just a matter of reviewing the file, make sure there's nothing that sticks out that should or shouldn't be there, and making a decision on whether or not you want to reaffirm your rights to the roads. And
Well, I think we
again,
should-
I think your exposure is limited. The downside would be, possibly inviting litigation over these roads with the town, but we think that the trustees think it's a worthy cause.
Yeah, can we possibly make a resolution tonight, subject to Chris confirming that everything's in order?
Sure.
Or do you want to wait until Chris
I
does
think
the
we should
research?
review it, and then
Review it first?
next meeting we could.
Fair enough?
Draft a
You all right with
resolution
that?
That's fine
for
by
the
me.
next meeting.
Okay,
Okay, very good.
so it looks like
Okay.
that's the direction we're going in. All right, good.
Great.
Thank you. Rick.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Barry?
Thank you.
Okay, so this is an application entitled Floken, which is basically to reconstruct bulkheading that's been there for a very long time, in place in kind, well, not in kind, I should say. It's actually going to be tropical hardwood with the vinyl sheathing, and then to rebuild a dock with a platform that was washed away in Sandy. All of this is shown on the things I delivered to your office specifically today. So there's a New York State DEC permit for this work. There's the George Walbridge most recent surveys dated April 19th. And then there's the plans that just show the dock, the cross-sections of the dock and the bulkhead and the materials. So the only thing that probably needs a little bit of explanation, at one point we were trying to also introduce some biologs to this project, and the DEC objected, so we withdrew that modification request. So the survey that is connected with and attached to the DEC permit, dated October 15th of 2018, is essentially the same as the survey dated April 19th, 2019, because we had to have them remove the biologs. Add biologs, remove biologs. So now it's dated differently, but it's exactly the same project.
Lori, quick question, and why did the DEC frown upon the biolog?
We got a letter from a technical advisor there that basically said,
Because I know, as you do, that it's a fairly common application.
right, but in this instance, the field inspector found the area in question is already heavily vegetated at the shoreline, and that the photos show minimal erosion, if any. So please justify why the core logs were necessary. So we decided not to pursue.
All right, thank you.
And that was an area that is not protected on the property, that we're not looking to protect. We're only doing in-place replacement of the bulkhead and the dock.
Excuse me, Roy, the file I have shows dock and platform replacement
Yep.
dated 1/9/17. Is there a subsequent application, or is that later in the...
No, that's, we've got a full file here, so there's a little depth to this.
I see,
No,
okay.
it's,
That's a separate...
Do you have the package we submitted today, which
I
broke
think
it
so.
down to the bare necessities?
DEC approval of September 24th, 18.
Correct.
now, keep in mind, it's the exact same wording.
Okay.
Yes.
Nothing changed.
Yeah, it only got
This file doesn't
confusing
seem to have
because
it.
in the middle, we added the biologs and then took them away again.
So then this may be up there. Okay. Thank you, Jim.
This bulkhead's been in existence since long before my client bought the property in 1993. It's been there a very long time. And the dock was there until Sandy.
Lori, why haven't they waited 7 years to try to replace that dock?
I can fill in some of the history on that because I think it may predate you.
It does.
Okay. This property, they were trying to do a minor subdivision on this property a few years ago. Right now, there's what, 3 houses on this property?
3 houses and a foundation.
3 houses and a foundation. One of the houses literally is actually in the pond. The foundation comes down right into the pond. There was an application that went through the ZBA a number of years ago where they were going to try and basically clean this property up, take the large house, the main house, put that on one parcel, take the 2 smaller houses, put that on a second parcel, and everybody was happy because they were going to be removing a significant portion of this bulkhead and doing soft and vegetated buffers throughout, bringing the entire property, which is pre-existing non-conforming on their clearing, up to code. It all went well until the neighbors got wind of it. And a couple of the neighbors in the Georgia Association challenged it on the fact that it would create two non-conforming lots area-wise, even though there's a whole bunch of properties in Georgia Association that are smaller than what the yield would be on these 2 properties. The owner backed off and circled back to what the original plan was, and that was, I have a bulkhead which is failing. It's been failing probably for the last 10 years. The only reason they held off on trying to do anything with it is there was this deal in play. The deal fell apart, and here they are today. They do have DEC permits. We had held this one out for a while because the applicant was going to try and do some core logs at the northwest portion of the property. West-ish, it kind of curves around.
I have to look at the survey.
Anyway, and like the DEC said, the area really wasn't that threatened. What you do see sometimes when the wind is blowing over there, the waves are kind of lapping, and yes, there's nice dense vegetation, but you got a situation where a lot of the root systems are exposed, and I would have thought it would have been intuitive to go ahead and allow some core logs in there and require some additional planting. DEC said no, it doesn't seem like the applicant is looking to challenge their position, and here we are tonight.
Yeah. They really just want to rebuild what they have.
Yeah.
And I did notice the dock and the bulkhead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, presently, the dock is not there.
Yeah, I
Right.
see that. That's why I was asking.
Yep.
Okay, but I did see aerials. This is going back early on when they were trying to do the subdivision. There were aerials that clearly showed that finger pier going out, showed the
I've seen
platform
it
on the
before.
backside
I've been on the
of it.
water
So
when it was there.
they're not trying to expand. They're not trying to change anything. I think this is one we
Is
can.
stop on a list of docks?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, this is a pre-existing
Yeah.
dock. They've been paying-
Straightforward.
They've been paying a fee on it for years.
They may be doing
I'd like to make a motion to approve this.
And I would second that motion.
Okay.
All in favor?
All
Aye.
right.
Thank you, Lori.
Can we get that in writing?
Come on.
Sorry?
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow. Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Ken Barber.
Pass those down. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm here today to give an update and a summary report on one of the projects that you're aware of that I sought permission for back in 2017 at this point, but we've finished up the work that we're doing, so I just wanted to report on that. And then I have my colleague Kim Manzo with me today, who's going to be presenting. She's the project lead on the Macroalgae Project in Acabonic, another project I've been here seeking permission to conduct in East Hampton as well. So I'll get through my end of things, and then Kim will come up and do her thing as well. Yes, I appreciate that, thank you. All right, so we kind of went through that already. So just to refresh everyone's memory from back in 2017 when we first started talking about this, the issue was I had an open grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to do eelgrass restoration in a couple of different areas. We had expressed interest in doing some work in Napeag because of the existing meadows there and desire to build on, but we really kind of to learn more and do a true, suitability study to determine exactly where we could do this to get the best success and to hopefully establish this as a longer-term receiving areas for when we get other funding to do eelgrass restoration, and we really see the most restoration success in the areas that we visit continually and keep adding to. So this was an investment in hopefully making Napeag one of those sites. Yeah, so that kind of brought us to that. I wasn't really going to talk about the shellfish stuff today. We'll just kind of stay focused on the eelgrass. So again, just to refresh everybody a little bit, what we're looking at is submarine groundwater discharge. So where the groundwater is coming out into the open water and looking at that interface, and that was something of real interest to us because we've really found as water temperatures are starting to rise and the multiple stressors that eelgrass is feeling from other parameters as well, that if we could identify these areas that have that cooler groundwater influx, we really think that we could have longer-term restoration success, especially in light of our water temperatures starting to rise a bit. So we really kind of wanted to characterize that in this site specifically. It also is a factor in some of the other work we're doing with PRBs and even the macroalgae, so really trying to understand and get that baseline of what we have and then better dictate and use that applied science to have the most success with some of these efforts we're doing.
Kim, other than the temperature issues, what other stresses do you think occur in Napeag that would be causing trouble with the eelgrass?
Really, I mean, Kim, you could interject here too, but I think temperature, because Napeag is a pretty...
Temperature?
Yeah.
I'd say some eutrophication, like fouling of the grass itself, nutrient levels are higher.
Yeah, but what's the source of your nutrient levels? I mean, as far as development, there's virtually no development on the east side there, and nearly no development on the south side.
I mean, it's traveling, through that groundwater too from other places depending on where the flow is coming from. But as Kim mentioned, it's not a huge problem there. In other areas, yeah, it's definitely the fouling of the plants and just, the water table, the surface water being shaded out by, the different algal blooms. But yeah, we don't really see it. Overall, that's why it's an attractive site to us, because we can see it as something that, could be a good long-term area if we could, further go that next step and do it directly in these areas that we've mapped the groundwater to have another level of assurance that, it could be successful. But we see, die-offs, there's been a lot of different things. It's been kind of a moving target that, we've been at this for a very long time, my colleague Kim and Chris Pickerel and Steve Schott and our whole team. So there's sometimes, in areas that you think would be, perfect for this, we're finding it does in other areas. It seems like...
Is there any other things that you think could be done to Napeag that would enhance the
I mean, in terms of that, we have good sediment. It's on the west side, and you'll see with the data, there was a significant difference in the surface temperature and, to some degree, the groundwater temperature as well, and that's kind of influx, and that's why we're not really seeing any eelgrass on that western shore. It's pretty much all on that eastern area, and that's where we ended up doing our test plantings based on the data that we collected. So something like that, it's purely a temperature issue, so there's not as much.
Yeah,
that
now,
we
just
can do.
because I remember as kids, we had 2 channels open over there.
Yeah.
And we had pretty much, you had a channel that literally, was dredged around a good portion of that, so you had a good, pretty significant water change there, and you had almost too much eelgrass. It was hard to swim or even walk through it.
Sure, yeah, and we still see the positive benefit of that legacy, channel on the east side. You could feel the water, the cooler water coming through, and we think that's why, too, the eelgrass is happy, on that side of the harbor. And again, it's further confirmed by our actual, groundwater measurements, so it's getting it from the surface water to some degree because of that channel, and also, coming up through the groundwater. So back to some of the evaluations. For this specific project, we used our Trident. We didn't use our seepage meter, so we weren't sampling the actual water for anything, any nutrients or anything like that. We were purely doing temperature and conductance to determine where the groundwater is and to map it accordingly. So we were out there in August of 2017 at this point. I finally got out in the field and did some of this work myself as well with my colleagues. So we had a good team going. If you look at the sheet that I had provided, we did 14 transects, and each of those transects had 7 stations on them. So we had a lot of data points, a lot of data that we collected. So it's a really good, robust study that we were able to do for a relatively, minimal price. So you could see these were all the areas that we did throughout, and we also did the work in 3 Mile as well, but it's a little less significant, so mainly focusing on that. We only did, I think that says 6, but it's only 3 transects that we did there. We saw a lot of sediment issues in the specific area we were looking. Not to say that eelgrass can't be supported elsewhere in 3 Mile, but with the limited resources we had to try to go somewhere where we knew it historically was, and there was still some there, it wasn't looking good for a candidate for restoration, so we really focused more of our efforts and the test planting funds in that peak.
You may have already said this, and I apologize, but I know when we had that issue in Northwest Harbor, because it just got too hot,
yeah,
the water, do you feel that the overall temperature is conducive to doing the grass?
Well, that's why, this method, and, we thank you again for your support, because we really want to use this as part of our toolkit now to kind of go back to some areas where we didn't think it might be possible in the past based on surface water data that we had. Now, if we could, start to map out sites like this before we do it, there's a possibility in areas that we ruled out based on temperature, surface water temperature in the past, we could kind of revisit and see if it might be feasible by taking into account this information.
But have you taken the temperature for a calendar, or whatever time that is conducive to growing? Have you done that in that peak?
Yes, we did surface water and groundwater, yeah.
And it was favorable?
Yeah, but it was from the west side to the east side, there was a 3-degree temperature difference from the west side versus the east side, and I think, again, that has to do with some of that water, coming in through that older channel, and also the higher influx of the groundwater. It makes that much of a difference.
Oh, okay.
So it was actually, 3-degree difference from side to side, which was, that's pretty significant. So yeah, this is what we have in front of us here. So as I mentioned, it was 14 of these sites. We really did collect a very good amount of data, and we all kind of surmised, and it just proved the point. We thought that there was a pretty good influx and flow in this area, and there indeed was. So based on that, we got to the test planting portion of this. I know that photo doesn't look very impressive, but it's just our test planting. It's really shallow sites that we worked in, and as of last October, the last time we were out there monitoring, the eelgrass that we planted was all still there. So that's a really good sign. The team is actually going out later on in the month as part of another project that we're doing with Peconic Estuary Program, and they're going to check on them again. So if they're still there, that's even better. But even the fact that they survived, that one growing season, that's a good sign too. So we're hopeful this could be kind of established as a longer-term site. So the sites that we did plant, we kind of wanted to get, capture a good area of the, east side where we thought that it would be good. We also took into account the existing eelgrass, because, there's a pretty decent standstill in a lot of these areas, so we wanted to focus on the areas that were kind of adjacent to existing meadows, but also had that strong, groundwater flow, and did it basically, right on the transect where we were monitoring, so we could really correlate the planting and know that we're planting in areas of high influx. So those were the 4 sites that we planted at, and as I mentioned, as of our last...
John has a question.
Oh, sorry, John.
Just wondering, if you may not know this because it may be too deep into the weeds of the report, but do you know if there was any difference between the temperatures of the water coming through up from the bottom between the stations in the southern end of the western shore and the northern end, because the topography is very different?
Yes, exactly, and that
I also
goes
know
with the
that,
drive.
At least the last time I was there, a lot of the eelgrass that hung on was toward the northern end, where I wouldn't expect there was as strong groundwater flow as there was in the south.
Yeah, so I think maybe the groundwater is compensating for, because they did, the test plantings held up there, and there was still eelgrass down there as well, but we could find that information out. Again, we have a ton of data, so that's kind of why I'm here, just to kind of introduce and give you a summary. We could provide, all the data, specifically for sure, if you want to, ask questions like that and really look into it, and we could definitely get you some answers.
Well, will there be a final report coming?
Yes, yeah, so I'm here, this is just the summary. We have we wanted to wait again until we go out one more time, just to, kind of close the loop in terms of how it did, and monitor one more time and wrap up, our aspect of the collaboration here. And but we'll certainly be issuing that. And then after that point, we could channel questions to the, specific experts involved.
I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, Kim, but when we talked about this initially, there was a hope that we were going to be working on a grant.
Yes.
That would provide funding to do a more extensive planting and restoration effort for eelgrass in Napeague Harbor. Is this the appropriate time to discuss, or do you want to continue further with the presentation?
No, I mean, this is pretty, I think we're, because this kind of gets to the, well, it's a nice transition, actually, right? So, we kind of, to sum it up, it's, it proved what we wanted it to prove favorably. 3 Mile wasn't as favorable, but Napeague has a lot of potential, and for that reason, we definitely want to continually seek funding. We've been extremely busy with the Big Shellfish project that we're doing and other things, so I haven't devoted time specifically to grant writing, but we're going to, be picking that up again this year. That's why there was a little lull in that. But we definitely want to kind of put it in our back to the base stewardship site network, and that's, kind of how I pitched it, these areas that we really want to commit to doing long-term work at. So if I know that, there's still trustee support to do that, then by all means, I plan to work with my team to try to get some funding and really make it happen, especially now that we have this great, data and proof that it could hopefully work.
Well, that's great. I mean, Napeague being one of the cleaner, healthier water bodies in town would be a great place to start, and then maybe as we can do some more remediation work in other water bodies, this could be a pilot to carry forward to other water bodies.
Yeah, so that's the hope. So yeah, we don't have anything currently lined up, but we're continually seeking, and as some of our other current projects that are just overloading us right now kind of phase down and wind down, we'll definitely be picking this up again starting this year. So I'm glad we're able to do this and connect again to make sure that, we're still on the same page, that we'd all like to see more of this happen and not peak, hopefully.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. And then, there's an opportunity too. Kim's going to talk a little bit about it, and then Kim Shaw's going to talk a little bit more about, some of the other things that we have going on in the town, and, there's a potential this could be one of our sites that we kind of do a multifaceted restoration to look at things, other than eelgrass, and we're still, we're doing a lot of spout and shell oyster reef, so we've been working with Barley or on our own or however we want to do this. We're starting to do stuff with red mussels, living shoreline work. So, there's a lot of opportunities there. I've been initially having conversations with Kim, too, about possibly going after some CPF money. So, there's the ball's rolling, and it's just, I wanted to give the update to make sure you knew that we're still committed to working in East Hampton and hopefully expanding upon some of these efforts.
Well, one last thought. So I'm here, I'm sitting, and I love the concept, But now, go back many, many years ago when there was plenty of eelgrass in that peak. What has changed? You do all this work, and my question is, what caused? Was it got warmer, nitrogen, and how do you prevent that from happening again?
Well, the biggest problem we always contend with, and this is, we had massive die-offs because of the large-scale algal blooms throughout, the Acabonics and South Shore embayments. So with that, when you get that mass die-off, eelgrass on its own, it's slow to recover on its own. So you're facing that problem that you're not going to get that natural recovery without helping it along again and making it, getting that critical mass back and letting that meadow get healthy enough to then start to, spread out on its own. So, the idea is if we don't continue to do this, if we do keep getting, mass die-offs, like we could, lose populations even more than we have. So a lot of the work that my colleagues have done, I think it's, saved the population in certain ways to, keep it going on its own because it's not really able to do that. It needs that human assistance a little bit more still.
Yeah, it's kind of a crapshoot because you're up against.
But,
At least by planting it in the areas where we know that cool groundwater is coming out, hopefully that's a little bit of an insurance plan that it'll last.
Yeah,
Oh,
'cause
good.
In the past, you've tried to reestablish
Thank you.
it in areas more or less at random.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it had to do with, priorities of, where funding was in line or where.
Where it existed before.
Exactly. So, but now we're really trying to get into that science of it and taking that preventative, it's almost an insurance policy that, if we're planting it in these areas of, nice, cool groundwater coming up, it's saving it.
And that's obviously fresh water coming up?
Yeah, it's the groundwater table, so it comes up, and, certain areas, have more drive than others. This area, you see in the aerials, the kind of reddish sand, sometimes that's indicative of iron, which, could correlate to a high groundwater, situation. So that was why, it interested us to do it in this specific site, because we pretty much, knew that groundwater was coming through this area, and the, impact it could have on the potential of eelgrass restoration is something that's...
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that, because I'm thinking it'd be really disappointing to do all the work and, have a die-off again, but with those other, factors, you stand to have a better chance.
Exactly, and that's, that's with, natural resources in general, there's a lot that could happen, but it's, we're making the decision to try to keep things going and, get it to a sustainable level again.
Thank you.
I hope this helps, but it also seems to be naturally starting to come back on the southern end in that peak, very slowly, but we see that as a sign that that's a great place for us to
Help it
continue
along.
to do restoration, is that the conditions will be improving there for us to be coming back.
All right, so that's all I had. So thank you again for your, support of this project, and we'll keep you updated. We'll get you the full report and all of the data you could sift through, and if you have specific questions, again, we're happy to answer them, and hopefully the data could be useful to other things and questions you might have too. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Kim Manson.
Part one, I thought it was going first. Hello.
Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm Kim Manzo. I've been with Cornell about 17 years almost now, mostly doing eelgrass work, but now I'm dabbling with some other things, including this macroalgae project. So when we say macroalgae, basically it's seaweed. It's the same thing, same word. But seaweeds are actually an algae, so similar to plants, they're photosynthetic. They need light and they need nutrients to grow, and so we're kind of trying to take advantage of that natural ability of the seaweeds to take up nitrogen from the water column and use it to grow. This way, when we remove the seaweed from that system, we're literally pulling the nitrogen out with it. So this was the area of focus. This is Acabonic Harbor here. This is the western head. So this is Springs General Store here. This is kind of where our access point is. We'd go down to the kayak launch here to access the site. So basically, I should have done a little bit more background, but I'll try to be brief about it. This is based off of previous work that Ron Paulson had done in this area with the Trident surveys, and he had found that along, the marsh bank and as well as the culvert that drains Pussy's Pond were the areas that had the highest nitrogen levels that were coming up through the region. So that's why we tried to focus. We tried to focus on capturing as much of the flow out of the pond as well as, along the marsh where he had gotten some high readings here. So we basically use these frames that we used to call them turf frames. We used to use them for planting eelgrass. But they're basically just lobster pot material with bricks so that they stay weighted to the ground, and it's just an anchoring point for us to attach the seaweed to. So we focused on two different types of seaweed, Gracilaria and Ulva. Now both of these species are found naturally in Acabonic Harbor, so this way we're not introducing anything. The idea with the Ulva was that it's a little bit it's able to withstand desiccation, so we thought, well, maybe we could try some of these intertidally where he was getting, groundwater seepage points coming in. And then we were just going to use the red alga, Gracilaria, for all the subtidal applications. Okay, this is just background information about us acquiring the permits we needed to do the project. So in total, we had 30 of these frames. The majority of them we put in this area, we called it the array, and the idea was to try to capture the mouth of the culvert there and capture as much of the flow coming out of there. But we also wanted to experiment with some intertidal frames and also put a few of them in the creek itself, which I guess is elevated and is usually flowing in the same direction no matter the tide. Most of this.
You're probably aware there's been extensive work in Pussy's Pond to clean it up.
Yes,
Okay.
and I heard that it's going quite well. There's some promising,
Well, I saw somebody recently, and he told me the numbers were good.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that means. I said, oh, cool.
yeah,
Yeah. As I said, keep it up.
yeah.
Yeah, no, seriously, though, yeah.
Stuff is working. and,
Excellent.
Trying to keep it going.
Yep.
So let's see. The experiment began July 2nd. I was trying to do the months of June, July, August. It got delayed a little bit, so I did the months of July, August, and September for this study. So basically, each month was sort of its own treatment. We would start fresh at the beginning of the month with new specimens. Initially, I monitored weekly. I wasn't sure how fast the algae was going to grow and how often we were going to need to harvest it. So initially, I started monitoring it weekly, and then I realized I think we will be able to just get away with the monthly sampling. They were about doubling in size, but they weren't shading each other out or anything like that. So here's some project photos. Special thanks to some familiar faces here, Melissa, as well as Lauren Steinberg, Samantha Klein, Juliana Grillo. They came out and helped me during sampling days. It was extremely helpful, and we were super, efficient. So they had a whole, system down of, we would pull the tray up, and we would gather up all the pieces of algae, spin it in the salad spinner, weigh it to get a wet weight, and then each one was bagged, and then I would bring it back to the lab to dry it out for dry weights, and then to send out for analysis, nutrient.
Interesting.
So these are the two species of algae here. You recognize the Ulva and the Gracilaria. That was about the size we were using. Sure. So here's some of sort of the results photos. You can see after we would pull up the frame, they looked a lot larger than when we first put them out. Some interesting observations. I'll get into it a little bit more, but one thing that happened the first month when we were collecting some of these specimens to use for the project, some of them have gone reproductive, which basically means they had those sporophytes on them, and they were kind of yellowing out. They looked a little different than the others, and a lot of those ended up dying, but some of them actually, they basically just clone themselves and then keep growing. So there were some interesting little things like that. And then we actually had natural recruitment of the Gracilaria growing on the lines by the end of the project, so that was kind of cool. So you can see this is our access point of the site here. So by August, September, it's already quite eutrophied and has a big algae bloom going on in there. So there's a lot of Ulva and Gracilaria in there already. And this picture is kind of fuzzy, you could barely see, but this was me wading out to the array where the seaweed frames were. And you could see there were, in some spots, big sheets of ulva had kind of gotten tangled in there and shaded some of them. So I'm sure that had an effect on our results, but I'll get into that a little bit. Some more project photos. So because I wasn't sure how often I was going to have to be sampling, I decided to use these silicone grafting clips, because this way it would be easy for me to, you know, take them off, put them back on. I wasn't using plastic that I was going to lose in there. It's silicone, so it's a very natural element. What else? Yeah, so just more of what you could see. This is what it looked like in some areas of the naturally occurring algae that was in the bottom here. This was one of the intertidal frames. I'm going to explain why. During the second month, I decided to get rid of all the exclusion netting, and it was because there was this killifish that got stuck in one of them, and I was just like kind of heartbroken about it. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to affect any more wildlife. But I think that happened to be that it was because this was one of the intertidal frames, and when the tide went out, he was probably sitting on top of it, and then he was trying to, yeah. All right, so some of our growth data here. Basically, overall, it was very successful. For the month of July, we had a 76% growth increase. August was 142%, September 123%. This is including the specimens that we lost. So when I'm going in there and I have to pick up the frame of seaweed, there's a lot of that other seaweed on there. You have to clear it all away. And in the process of lifting it, I feel like some of them came off and unhooked. But if I sort of remove the zeros out of the data, the results are much more impressive. 145%, 220%, and 162% growth. So that's more than doubling, or at least doubling, if not tripling in size.
How does that compare to the naturally occurring stands of this stuff in the area?
So basically, we're just quantifying what's already happening in there. All this algae that's in there is doing the same thing. The problem is that it's staying in there, and without us going in there and removing all of it, all that nitrogen is getting reincorporated back into that system again. So this is just a way for us to understand this much algae in this water body can pull this much nitrogen out.
All right.
Right.
Is there any what's your long-term plan here?
So the long-term plan is to scale this up and maybe have some type of a long line system that would be very easy to maintain. You would put it out and come back months later and harvest it.
Do you think that there might be a point where you're going in and instead of throwing all of this wire mesh and all that stuff in there, that you'd be going in and cutting or harvesting the tops of the stuff that's actually growing in there?
Yes, that is definitely an idea with the long line system, because ideally we would want them to be tied onto the long line system.
No, I'm not talking about ones tied to a line. I'm talking
just
about
the natural stuff?
Because I saw from the aerial, it seems like there's some significant areas of this stuff growing there.
There is.
Is there a case where you go in there and you abbreviate some of that growth?
I have that as a bullet at the end as potential, next step, yes. If we could just be pulling some of that naturally occurring stuff out of there and quantifying it in some way,
Yeah.
then we can get an estimate.
Just kind of looking at it, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want to hurt your feelings. But if you were a farmer, you'd be going bust. Okay, you're just not getting enough growth on these plants to make it worthwhile.
No, I know, but that's why this was just a study, just to get our, foot in the door,
Yeah.
to experiment with it, The other thing is, we're using seaweeds that are naturally occurring there. I'm literally collecting the seaweed out of that embayment and then putting it in this experimental setup. Ideally, when you do seaweed aquaculture, you culture it from a lab. And then you can control the conditions to the point where you could starve it of nitrogen and then put it out there, and it's going to, need a lot more of it to grow, and it's going to grow really
There's
quickly.
protocols out there already for
Right.
all that.
Yes. Yeah. So we work with Charlie Yarish, from UConn on our kelp aquaculture study, and he also advised us on this as well. So.
But if you could harvest the natural stuff in a way that would still leave the root systems and stuff intact,
There's actually no root systems, it's all just drift algae in there.
There's nothing attached to anything?
No, it's all just drift, and it tends to just gather in that launch area.
But would removing the natural stuff have the same effect as far as nitrogen removal?
I would say yes, but I would think that doing both in conjunction with each other would be even better. I mean, we could be going out there tending to these lines, and then also every time we're out there visiting, pulling up a load of the natural algae, you know, so we could be doing both. And then we'd really be maximizing our time there and the amount of nitrogen that we're actually pulling out.
We're really kind, we just ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
So just give it right back to us.
I might get to it later on. I don't want to like bore you guys with the numbers too much here, but I just wanted to show that we were successful. I wanted to bring this up because this was from Ron's Trident work, and we noticed, you know, this number up here, up into the culvert area, had extremely high pore water nitrogen, and my some of my results. So for the final month, I did all 6 of the ones that weren't in the array. I did them within the creek, and that's where I got the most astounding results. So I had over 4% nitrogen, like tissue nitrogen, in those samples from there, which was higher than what they get in the Bronx River estuary, Charlie Yarish's work that he had done there. So it shows that there's a lot of nitrogen to be had there for these plants. They weren't limited in that way. So also, let's see, I wanted to just touch on, we have to talk about, you know, ideas for what we can do with this seaweed afterwards. If we start, you know, an aquaculture program and we have this product afterwards, you know, it can be used for a lot of different things.
You can eat it, right?
You can eat it,
Yeah.
but the main concern is, you know, it's in a closed water body. You know, we have to worry about the metals and other things in there. So we also did the metal analysis. Nothing seemed really off the charts, but the thing is, it was hard for me to find the FDA regulation on some of these metals, like what their, you know, standards are. I actually found, you know, in Europe, they're a little bit more strict about a lot of these standards. And so I found that the arsenic and lead might be a problem in terms of a food product, but we do need to research this a little bit more. Okay, so observations and next steps. So like I mentioned, it was successful in growing the seaweed. It at least doubled or tripled in size over the course of 1 month. So if you can imagine if it was out there for 3 months, they would have, you know, grown up even more. So I did exclusion netting for the first month and the third month on every other frame. And I was thinking more in terms of, you know, protecting it from birds eating the seaweed, but there was such a, you know, a buffet of seaweed already in there. The birds weren't interested in what I was growing. But it actually ended up helping having the exclusion because it actually prevented some of that drift algae from tangling in my samples. So it kind of was able to buffer it, and then it would sort of drift off rather than getting tangled. The OVA ended up not really working very well. I had only used it in those 3 intertidal applications, and since the seaweed was attached a little bit off the bottom, you know, normally, you know, seaweeds can survive intertidal because they're sitting on that wet surface, but since they were elevated that little bit and they were just, you know, exposed to the air, and they got a little bit too desiccated that they died. So lessons learned, I definitely want to make sure I use larger sample sizes than I did on the first month. I started with really small fragment pieces in the first month, and there wasn't very much growth. And also I had that issue with some of them were reproductive, and they were basically starting to die. And then, as we've been talking about, so there's an overabundance of natural macroalgae growing here. They clog the frames. They cause a lot of extra effort in trying to clean all that other algae off before we can make sure that we're, you know, counting the ones that we, you know, we're trying to grow and clipped. And let's see. So key factors to avoid if we were to repeat this again would be don't use the reproductive seaweed. Netting should be used, especially later in the summer when the natural algae is, you know, blooming and at its peak, because it'll help protect the specimens. And also the intertidal frames If we continue to do that, we need to get into a little bit of deeper water. It has to be really just at the lower intertidal end, if at all. We might be better off looking into the like PRBs and other things for some of these intertidal applications. Okay, so for next steps, I put in for the same permits again for this year, just so that I was prepared in case we wanted to do this again. I also am coming up with, a scale-up option. We want to make sure that anything that happens in this harbor doesn't affect the recreational use, because there are a lot of people that like to kayak out of here. It's very shallow, very muddy. There really aren't people walking around. You really can only kayak, or else you're going to sink in the mud. But we thought that possibly along like the western side, I guess it's the western side, it's all undeveloped and it's really inaccessible. So that would be a nice area to maybe have like a long line system. And let's see. And yes, so I wanted to propose about what you had mentioned about when we're here, when we're there, we could also be harvesting some of the naturally occurring algae, spinning it, getting a wet weight on it, and then it could be composted in the town, compost or something like that. But we'll have an idea of how much nitrogen we're pulling out of there, because we could take a subsample of it, have it analyzed, and then be able to, to scale that up and say, well, it was, this much algae that we took out. So the average, the average nitrogen, that was removed would be this. We would have a good idea how much we're pulling out of that system.
So in your last slide, I think you showed some calculations of how much nitrogen you were able to pull out. And just from like a layman's perspective, I have no idea. Is that a lot? Is that a little? Is that enough to move the needle? I mean, how much is in there? Or?
I mean, it seems insignificant in that, we're talking ounces rather than, pounds of nitrogen. But I think this was a small-scale project, and I think that, it's something to be said for, these tiny little pieces of seaweed, did take a good amount, 16 grams of nitrogen. Seems like a pretty large amount to me, considering how small of, of the scale it was. So.
Okay.
I have a question. Sure. What's the basic overall objective of this project? Is it to work on that area of the harbor to reduce nitrogen in that particular area of the harbor? Is it to scale up to a whole harbor or a larger area? Is it to grow algae to further that objective, or remove natural algae to further that objective, or all those things? Or is it basically just some basic research to determine amount of algae, and nitrogen removed by that algae?
So no, the main purpose was really just trying to find a way of, biomitigating the nitrogen that we, know is getting inputted into that system, something that we could do right now and have an effect, now, and not wait for, septic systems to be improved and things like that. So just a natural method of trying to do something about the problem.
To piggyback on John's question, to what scale would you have to ramp this up to have some kind of a meaningful impact on that area of Acabonic Creek?
I would say, having 2 or 3 long lines that run almost the entire length of that neck of the harbor. I mean, that's something that I would have to work on a little bit more in a proposal or something like that, I guess, to really get it down to, taking these numbers and then figuring out, if we want to remove this much nitrogen, how much seaweed do we need?
Right.
So we can do that.
Why I asked the question is the trustees have done 6 years of water testing with Dr. Goldberg from Stony Brook University.
Mm-hmm.
There are clearly some very impacted water bodies with nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people in the community are turning to the trustees for some leadership on this issue.
Mm-hmm.
And, as the stewards of these water bodies, I think there's a huge concern that we need to start to move this needle. If we're going to see success with projects like, Kim Barber proposed earlier, nitrogen loading is definitely something we have to deal with. Water temperature, we may not have as much control over. We may with environmental dredging and other types of projects. But I think there is an interest throughout our community, because a lot of people are approaching me asking, what are the trustees doing to address this issue? So it would be nice to see a longer-term vision for something like this in the near future.
Okay. Yeah, I had mentioned earlier, you know, to really do this the right way, to use, you know, to reference him again, Charlie Yarish from UConn, who's really the regional expert at, you know, macroalgae, aquaculture, and also using it for these purposes, specifically for, you know, bio.
The other point that's been brought to my attention is this spring we saw an enormous amount of macroalgae in Mauritius Bay, Shinnecock Bay, areas of Acabonic Bay, and you know people thought that there were harmful algal blooms taking place, but it was the more benign macroalgae. But people were afraid to swim. The water was cloudy. So we are seeing an enormous amount of macroalgae developing in certain areas.
Right.
You know, how does cultivating more algae complement or impact this natural occurrence that we're seeing?
Right, so it's the act of removing it that is, you know, what's going to be pulling it out, you know, pulling out that nitrogen. So, yeah, so we're seeing a lot of blooms. I was just diving in Belport Bay last week, and the whole entire ground is covered in ulva and gracilaria also. We used to call it a green bloom or green tide bloom when you see the ulva, but gracilaria seems to be, you know, in the mix now. So it's just a type of bloom that, you know, it's just an indication of eutrophication.
Which would you say is negative or positive?
I mean, it's positive that the seaweed is taking it up and not the microalgae that would shade the water column. But the seaweed sitting on the bottom is not necessarily better either, because it can cause, you know, when ulva gets really big, it can cause like smothering of the bottom and cause anoxic areas. So it's fine as it's growing, but once it dies, then all the nitrogen just gets reintroduced back into that system. And the problem starts all over again. So.
Thank you.
So that was about it. Yeah. Oh, and also, you know, this proposal was sort of a joint joint effort with Ron Paulson, who is also going to be sort of zeroing in on some of the areas where he had already identified, you know, seepage points, and he's trying to do some work into installing a PRB into at least that one area that, you know, up the creek there. So he's trying to get his permitting and things like that. But if that does come through this summer, I'd like to try to work in conjunction with him, maybe, you know, put some frames of seaweed just outside of his PRB area, or at least be able to compare last year's versus this year's, you know, and see if his PRB is making a difference.
Is he a colleague of yours at Cornell?
Yes, we just don't really see, we're not in the same offices, but yes.
Maybe you could ask him to check in with us.
Sure.
That'd be great.
I know, I don't see him very often either.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Hey, Jim and Brian, has there been any attempt at opening a door with the state for reopening the cut on the northeast cut at Hicks Island? Is that?
I'm trying to build up to something, to try and put together a team with the county, state, and Fish and Wildlife, because, you know, there's a whole bunch of, like, you use interested groups that could be benefited. The problem on each and every one of them is funding. And maybe as a cooperative thing, we could perhaps get something going.
Round three of Kim?
The Kim Club.
Yeah.
So tonight, Melissa and I are just going to highlight some of the projects that CPF Water Quality has funded and some ongoing grant projects that we've had. So there was a lot of talk tonight about Pussy's Pond and Acabonic Harbor. That was funded by New York State Department of State award that we got a couple years ago. We're actually just trying to wrap that up and close that out. We're really thrilled with some of the results that we're seeing in there, and you'll see in some of the slides that I have. Another grant that we have that we're just getting started on was from New York State DEC for Gann Road. We're going to do a reactive barrier on the upland area to capture some of that nitrogen before it releases the harbor.
And that's another collaboration project with Cornell Cooperative Extension. It's an injection PRV.
And this is our new logo for our Clean Water East Hampton. It's a great...
I like it.
Yeah, it's a great design. Melissa had a little bit of a hand in that.
Way to go, girl.
So this is something new we just started at Pussy's Pond. You might have seen it when you've been driving by. It's an experiment that we've been doing for about 3 years in a different area at Pussy's Pond. And we haven't seen frag regrowth there in at least 3 years. So we're doing a heavy salt application. We've got 2 controls and 2 areas that we've applied salt. And we're just monitoring this to see how effective that could be in Phragmites reduction.
So we're trying several different methods to try to eradicate the frag over here. So the first method, as Kim was saying, is a mechanical removal of frag. And now we're doing different kinds of salt treatments. So the first trial was with upwellers, so basically like a shallow monitoring well that was packed with salt to dose the groundwater. And now we're doing a treatment on the surface.
Upwellers are closer to the culvert and not by the top by the
Okay, if you're dumping heavy loads of salt in here, you doing any monitoring as far as the impacts on non-target organisms, other vascular plant life?
Yep. What we did before we did any of this, again, working with Ron Paulson and Cornell, he has his Trident probe. We went in and looked groundwater flows in the area, and we specifically targeted these areas based on the observations through, his testing.
And we did a survey of all the native, not very many natives in there, but native plants out there with Land Acquisition Department.
What would be the ultimate goal here, scaling this thing up? Would it be to put salt all over everything, or would it be...
It's not going to work everywhere. Here we just happen to have, this is the area of the application that we did about 3 years ago, native vegetation all coming back, and we just started clearing up in this area, and our current work is closer to the bridge. But we opened up the view shed, and I think we haven't seen an algal boom in Pussy's Pond since we did a lot of this work. The water quality is very clear.
There's plenty of cladophora floating around the surface there.
This was just last week.
I was by there the other day. There was a whole friggin' rafts of it floating across the pond. Not where you took the picture, just outside.
Yeah, right.
It's just outside, but...
But the idea is kind of to stress the frag, so then the native plants can start to come back.
Yeah, no, my concern would be, that, for all intents and purposes, there's so much freshwater input there that it's more or less a freshwater system. You start dumping a bunch of salt in there, it's going to be antagonistic to a lot of the plants that would typically be growing in there.
Well, Spartina's salt tolerant, so we actually did a planting of Spartina with
All
Cornell.
along this, we stabilized the bank with a coir log and did some native plantings, but all this upland area that's coming back is the native seed bank that was there this whole time. This is not the first time we tried to remove frag here. The Boy Scouts did it years ago. Ducks Unlimited did it with no success. I think what's helping us here is that we didn't just clear and walk away. We've been monitoring, doing different applications, trying to maintain and enhance that habitat with native species.
Yeah, but have you considered a cutting program over there?
Actually, yeah, Ron is actually considering doing a combination of cutting and treatment.
Because I understand that a lot of other organizations, I know Larry Penny had that pond looking beautiful years ago, and unfortunately, there was no follow-up.
Right.
We did it, we walked away, and there was absolutely no follow-up. And I know you guys had cut a significant portion of that just a couple of years ago. And again, it didn't seem like there was any follow-up.
Well,
You know,
before we go in and do anything, we do a lot of research, a lot of scientific analysis before we go in and do it. When we first looked at Pussy's Pond, we were on the opposite side. We were on the School Street side. And then after looking at groundwater flow, we moved over to the Blacksmith side because that was, you know, where we saw we could take advantage of a natural settings and actually have a project really be successful.
Kim, quick question. Is there any truth to the elementary school septic system making its way into the pond?
We don't see it going into Pussy's Pond. We see it going to Acabonic Harbor.
Okay.
Oh. So this is the Microalgae Project that you just heard about. So what we were doing there, and you said, you know, what scale is this project? What we're doing is looking for partners and building on that one grant that we got from the state. So we got that grant from the state. We did bioswales, we did habitat enhancement, frag removal, we did a reactive barrier, we did plantings, and now we added on another layer. We looked at macroalgae and how effective that could be. And I saw a little twinkle in your eyes when you were saying, oh, could you do this on a larger scale and be like a farmer with machinery? This is a different, this is a totally different scenario, where in Georgia Pond, you're using a mechanical removal of vascular plants, where this is floating algae. So it's a little bit different, not to confuse the two.
It's different, but Kim, it lends itself to exactly the same, somewhat very similar methodology.
Like Kim said, this was a pilot project. It's passive, low cost, and just testing out its effectiveness, very small scale. You know, algal grow-out projects are, you know, just happening all over the country. We could have done a cold, you know, winter grow-out. We were thinking about doing a project in Lake Montauk, but instead, we coupled this with the existing work for a summer grow-out for algae that, you know, typically you see in the summertime and grows in the warmer waters. So it was just another add-on to everything we're doing there. It's not going to save the world. This is all just, you know, triage and trying to demonstrate to people that we do have a problem in these waters. It's not everybody accepts that their septic system or their fertilization isn't impacting it. So it's all different little projects to demonstrate to people like, oh, now I get it. And so we just keep working on all these different projects. I think that we already sort of went over these results, which were impressive. The grow-out areas, same thing. So in this area, when Ron was in with his Trident probe, we were actually seeing extremely high ammonia, which was showing no breakdown at all. The good news is, well, this house is replacing its antiquated sanitary system. Springs General Store is replacing their sanitary system. It's Springs School and hopefully Ashwell Hall. So we already have a good baseline of what's going on there, and over time monitoring it, because Spring School, I believe, is breaking ground July 1st for their new system. So we've already got a good database.
These are just pictures.
You've already seen these, but it was cool. My staff actually helped out with it. And
You might just have a question.
Sure.
We've, you know, we're doing our water sampling with Goldberg, and he's done some microbial source tracking in 3 Mile Harbor, and we talked to him recently about expanding that into Acabonic, and we were talking about locations. Do you think that the location in that area would be a good location for us to test, and would it complement what you're doing in?
It's the next slide, I think.
I think it's towards the end.
Towards the end, okay. I'll get to it.
But we were going to touch on.
We're going to touch on that too. So this is Melissa's baby.
So 36 Gann Road was a recent CPF acquisition. We have plans to make it a demonstration site for water quality improvement and different methodologies that people can use on their own properties for improving water quality. So we have plans to install a permeable pavement along Gann Road to try to capture some of the runoff going down the road right into the harbor.
What does that mean exactly? You know,
So it would basically just be a swath of area that you dig out the existing pavement and then put in.
grate?
No, other permeable asphalt.
Or cement.
Or pavers, or,
It drains through it?
yeah, it goes right through it.
Okay.
A bioswale on the corner to kind of capture anything we can direct onto that corner. This is the proposed location of a new aquaculture hatchery, right next to the nursery, actually. We'd like to do a new low nitrogen septic system here, and then also potentially pump the sanitary from the Marine Patrol to try to get that away from the harbor. We actually don't even know where that sanitary system is. It's not on the plans.
Only Bill does, only Bill does.
No.
And then, like Kim was saying before, we got a grant from New York State DEC to do injection PRB here to try to...
A different technology, instead of doing a trench or what we did at Buzzards Pond, just another methodology to see how effective.
to capture a plume of nitrogen-rich groundwater.
What's the difference between that and a trench?
It's the same idea. You're creating an environment for microbial bacteria, denitrifying bacteria to thrive. So it's just a different method. So you're injecting a carbon source. It's a liquid rather than putting in wood chips that would be the carbon source in a trench.
So it's the carbon source.
It's it can be vegetable oil or molasses, a viscous solid or something.
And how far into the ground are you pumping that?
That is actually all part of Cornell Cooperative Extension's design, so that would depend on where the groundwater is at this point. I'm not sure.
We just, you know, the conceptual design got funded, and now we're moving forward with, you know, gathering all the data. Moving on, we do a lot with CPF. We're stormwater abatement for water quality improvement. We're doing projects everywhere from Sag Harbor to Montauk. Acabonic's already kicked off. Sag Harbor, they're in the process. These are all competitive bids that go out. Nelson Pope and Voorhees is doing the village.
And 3 Mill Harbor, and then Acabonic Harbor, we have Lero Group working on it.
So this is our Acabonic stormwater abatement project. We've hit a couple little snags with this one. We're still working on it. The company finally understands what we're trying to do here. Rain gardens, something with the pavements in here, and the launch ramp. So their first blush, when they first came back to us, there was curbs everywhere and concrete. We're like, no, no, this is a green project. No more concrete, no more gray. So it's a process in, you know, it's happening.
I can do this. So, as we were saying earlier, one of the biggest sources of nitrogen on Long Island is substandard septic systems. Effluent is above 50 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen for conventional systems. So the county has approved 6 different technologies that reduce nitrogen and effluent to below 19 milligrams per liter. So the town, in order to incentivize homeowners, property owners, commercial properties are also eligible, has put together a septic rebate. Property owners in the water protection district, so areas closer to the harbors and ponds, would get up to $16,000 if they put in one of the new low nitrogen septic systems.
From the town?
From the town, through the CPF Water Quality Fund. And then anywhere else in town would be eligible for up to $10,000. So any property owner, commercial, secondary homeowners, primary homeowners are eligible. New construction, because it's funded through CPF, is not eligible. And basically, you just have to meet the STAR income eligibility requirement, which is less than $500,000 a year. And then in order to incentivize the whole county to put these systems in, the county and the state also have grant programs, up to $30,000 combined through that. So with the rebate and the grants available, people can get up to $46,000 to put in for the new systems.
And they don't cost $46,000 on average. It's out here, it's between...
The average is $25,000 out here. There's some properties in Montauk, due to poor soils, that they can be, around 40.
When was this implemented?
September 1st, 2017.
So, this is all public education outreach is really critical. Melissa's been doing Mondays with Melissa, with CCOM, and just one-on-one with people coming in, is this real? Can I afford it?
Quick question, was it ever squared away with the county executive with regards to the taxes that folks would not be charged for having the septic systems put in?
I think the county's still waiting for a ruling from the IRS on that. And the town is actually talking about changing our program to be a direct pay to contractors to try to reduce that issue here.
So what we've also, besides doing, reaching out to Lions Head Association, working with homeowners associations, we also did a flyer, and we have tons
Septic forum and
yeah, a lot of public education outreach, a lot of tabling. We just did the Eco Fair. And this map is great. This is showing you all the locations for all the homeowners in East Hampton that have signed on to the program. And you can see we've got a really good concentration around 3 Mile Harbor and the Springs area. It seems to be very active in that area. So how many applications do we have altogether?
I think as of today, we had 142 eligibility applications submitted, 32 systems installed, and I think about 10 that are pending.
That's townwide.
Yeah, that's in the town of East Hampton.
But you got 132 in applications, so.
Yeah. It's moving along. This is just the announcement that we got from Spring School that they're going to be installing their new IA system. And like I said, Ashwell Hall and Springs General, that'll be a nice improvement to the area.
Are most of those new systems that are applied for or have been built in conjunction with renovations, major renovations or new construction?
Well,
do you have an idea of how many?
It's like half and half.
It's a mix, yeah.
For no reason?
Yeah, so substantial expansion, if you're doing 50% improvement on your home, either value or gross floor area, you're required to put in the new system, but you're still eligible for the rebate. And there's a lot of people that are voluntarily doing just because they want to improve water quality.
You wouldn't believe how many cesspools that are brick all around 3 Mile Harbor. And they just thought that the past 30 years that you couldn't run the dishwasher and flush the toilet at the same time. That was just life. And now with the new IA systems that are totally sealed, different story. A lot of happy people. Well, John can do this slide. This is another effort that we're involved with Legislator Fleming and Suffolk County and the trustees, monitoring the marshes on Mondays, looking for mosquito larvae growth and the hotspots. So that's an ongoing project, and hopefully gathering the data. I think the DEC usually likes to see 3 to 5 years of solid data on the marsh before they let you go forward with any type of marsh manipulation or anything like that. And then there'll be additional monitoring after whatever process you want to go through. But this is a great database that they're collecting to hopefully do something on the marsh to reduce methylene spraying. There's the team. So this is a new project that we're just applying for at the Acabonic Estuary grant award. We've teamed with CCOM.
You're going to replace the island by Rushmores?
Yeah. So it's a different concept than what Kim was doing with the utilizing native species. This would be constructing these floating
temporary mats
that are open, and you can put plants in, and it's the same sort of thing, uptake of nutrients. Cool little project in Montauk. I don't know if we're going to get funded. It's around $25,000. not a lot of money, but again, just another initiative. So we're going to have, signage in the area. If we get approved, maybe we'll have like the kayak company that's right next door to this installment, use it as a destination to learn more about what we're doing to improve water quality in the area. So again, another huge component of public education outreach and hopefully reaching a different population here.
So this would be harvested at the end of the season every year. You can take them out and then put them in a different location the next year if you choose to.
So totally applicable in other watersheds. It's just sort of the reason to showing you guys this. It's something that, we want to move forward in the future.
Is that going to be evaluated similarly?
Same thing,
to
yes.
biology?
So we were going to do a grant this year with USGS. We got a proposal from them to do source tracking in Acabonic Harbor. But doing a grant, there's just so much paperwork involved in resolutions and intake forms and all that stuff. We didn't want to rush it. So we are working on making an application next year, hopefully in cooperation with the trustees, to do some high-level microbial source tracking. We've already sort of identified the areas in Acabonic that we want to target. USGS came to us with a proposal. We made some tweaks to it, and hopefully we'll have something solid to move forward with next year.
Is there any reason why you wouldn't work with Dr. Goldberg, since he has 6 years of baseline data in this area and he's already doing this type of work with us?
Well, this is kind of jumping off of the USGS work that was done in Lake Montauk.
Right.
They did microbial source tracking out there. So this was actually brought to us by the Acabonic Protection Committee.
And the town and CCOM sponsored the effort in Lake Montauk, and then when they submitted a proposal for us, it was the only one that we've seen to be able to fund through, we couldn't fund it through CPF. So we're looking at grants.
I think we should probably get together and talk about our mutual
Sure.
interests in this. And
I don't think I've seen.
Right.
Maybe I haven't.
Different locations or just a collaboration.
And that's our new drone that we flew over Acabonic and got some great shots. So if you ever need drone footage, we have a couple of town employees who are getting certified, or some are certified and will be certified in flying.
We'll hold you to that.
That's it.
I have a quick question, Kim. This is not your area, I realize it, Cove Hollow, and they've got this great big pipe. Well, it is because it starts way up, on Long Lane. But my point is there any of those type of road runoff pipes that are going into our harbors now? And if so, how prehistoric? I mean, put a filter on it, something.
Well, Cove Hollow, I actually didn't include in this presentation tonight, but that was a CPF-funded effort to look at this, that pipe is 7,000 linear feet long from 114 to Georgia Pond, and, antiquated, all that water running through there. So we contracted out, and we had a contractor run a camera through there to see structurally if there was anything wrong with it that we needed to repair. Because ultimately, what we're looking to do is drop off a lot of that water on the upland before we get down to Georgia. So the first phase of that was complete, and...
What was the outcome of the camera work?
It's actually in good condition for its age, but it did have several utilities that went straight through the pipe, roots growing into it. So it needs a little bit of
water
maintenance.
lines, gas lines.
I can imagine, sure.
I read that in the paper, and I'm trying to think, I'm trying to visualize in my mind how these, what are they doing? Puncturing the...
Yes,
right through it.
Right through the water line, directional drilling. Oh, I hit something. Oh, it's clear.
And they say on those directional boards, they say, oh, no, it just goes around.
No, it goes right through. And
We have the
them are
pictures.
fairly dangerous.
Send in a bill.
Yeah. We're actually doing something very similar in Montauk. We just kicked off at Lowenstein. We're doing the same thing.
But for Cove Hollow, we're actually,
At Lowenstein Court?
yes.
What project are you doing?
The Lowenstein pipe, basically similar project is co-followed, getting survey, camera work to figure out the drainage area, and then working with engineers to reduce the amount of water entering the pipe, and then improve the water quality at the end with end-of-pipe treatment.
That's great.
Yeah. And we also just entered into contract, we're putting a Fabco filter and a huge...
A helix filter.
So that's not going to solve the problem. It's, again, just a little bit of triage in there.
This is over in Lake Montauk?
No, on the ocean side. at
Surfside.
Lowenstein, Surfside.
Yeah, Surfside Place.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay, the
The beach
between
access.
Atlantic Terrace and...
Yes, yes.
And surf club.
What about the underground aqua filter that runs from behind CVS with Pond all the way to Acabonic? Has anybody looked into that? Three Mile Harbor, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, speaking about 3 Mile Harbor, a lot of members of the public have approached me regarding the nitrogen loading taking place in the south end of the harbor. Could you possibly elaborate on the work in Tambar Creek? And then also we have the bulkhead along 3 Mile Harbor Road and Boatyard Lane, where there's water discharging right into the harbor there. And a lot of people are really concerned. You know, it's foamy, it's got a lot of protein in it.
That's another one of our projects that we're working on.
Okay.
And we're just waiting for some contractual work to be completed. But years ago, a French drain system was installed on the that grassy area at 3 Mile Harbor, head of the harbor, and that comes out into that containment where you see the continuous outfall of water, because it just is an incredible source of fresh water in there. We're going to retrofit that. We're going to be doing a reactive barrier in there. We've also approached the engineers who are designing the new reconstruction of the bulkhead parallel to 3 Mile Harbor Road, and we're going to do some retrofits in there. I'm not sure how receptive the engineering firm was on that, but we had some good ideas for helping alleviate all that water pressure buildup on the bulkhead and potentially extend the life and also do some treatment at the same time. Half of it is ready to go. The portion of the rebuild, I'm not so sure how much of our recommendations they incorporate into that bulkhead rebuild.
And Tambar Creek?
So we have 4 projects. Bioremediation, we have a permeable pavement, and 2 rain gardens. So they're in the design phase right now, so hopefully those will be ready to go by next year.
Thank you.
Is there anything the trustees can do to help with that bulkhead reconstruction to have them perhaps reconsider including some of your recommendations?
Jet filter.
Consider some of your recommendations?
How involved were you in the redesign and reconstruction of that bulkhead, or is that a town capital?
It's the first I've heard of it.
Town capital.
Town capital. Yeah. We could definitely talk about it and, you know, pull Ed Michaels into the discussion and see. Ed, when I went down and met with the engineers and Ed and Jimmy Bennett, everybody seemed to agree this retrofit that we had proposed in there was something that they wanted to move forward. Like I said, I haven't heard back from McLean Associates as to whether or not they incorporated it in their final design, but we'll definitely follow up on it.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else who wants to speak to the board? Okay, thank you, Kim, and Kim.
Thank you, ladies.
And Melissa.
And Melissa. I'm sorry. Okay, Arlene, I forgot to do roll call when we started.
Yeah, sure. John Walker,
Present.
Brian Burns,
Here.
Del Cullum, Rick Drew,
Present.
Jim Grimes,
Here.
Susan Gorkeeper, and Bill Taylor,
Here.
and Susan Volpel.
Here.
Thanks.
I'm here also.
Susie?
I'm here also.
Oh, Francis. Francis back. Okay.
All right, so move on to new business. Fortunately, we're still looking at this issue of lack of privacy at our office, so Jim had a conversation with some special counsel. So.
Well, I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I mean, we've been really concerned about what occurred not a month ago, not a week ago, something that goes all the way back to last October, okay, where members of our board were privately being recorded by somebody who wasn't party to the conversation, and we definitely would like to get to the bottom of it. We have engaged with the DA's office, who's working on this, and honestly, it doesn't seem to be going too fast. And I did speak to some other attorneys in that, and they suggested getting private counsel to kind of push this thing along. I spoke to an attorney the other day, Tim Hoover, from Hodgkin Russ, which is a firm that we're using for the deep water work, and I would like to, I'd like to hire them, put a cap on the amount of the spending that we could do before they come back to us. But this is something I feel strongly about, and I would like to see some action taken on it.
Yeah, this was the subject of the special meeting in the executive session we had, and most of these issues were discussed, and it seems like an issue we have to get to the bottom of.
Jim, what type of a cap are you talking about?
Well, we discussed it the other night as something like in the neighborhood of 10 hours or $4,000, I think is something reasonable.
With the ability to...
With the ability to come back to the board if it's deemed necessary. Hopefully it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's important that the trustee office be a safe place for the board and for the community to hold meetings, and I'm not in the slightest bit in favor of someone doing what they did. So, you know, I'm in support of trying to get to the bottom of it.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I'll second.
Go around the table. John?
Yes.
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Unacceptable.
All right, so we will retain
Tim Hoover.
Tim Hoover.
At Hodgkins Russ. We don't have, the one benefit to this is we don't have to come up with a retainer on this. It's a firm that we're already engaged with.
Okay. Move on. Other new business, we got a letter from the East Hampton Fire Department. They're requesting permission to hold their annual fireworks. On behalf of the East Hampton Fire Department, I respectfully request permission to hold the East Hampton Fire Department's annual Main Beach Fireworks fundraiser. This display is scheduled to be conducted on Saturday, August 17th, 2019, with a rain date of Sunday, August 18th, and will commence at approximately 8:30 p.m. Fireworks will be launched from an area adjacent to Hook Pond, just east of the Sea Spray Cottages, and will be conducted in strict accordance with all applicable local, state, and federal codes and regulations. I thank you for your assistance and consideration regarding this matter. Please feel free to contact me with any questions or concerns. Respectfully, Gerald Terza, Jr., Chief Engineer. Anybody want to?
How does this dovetail with the piping plover protection? Just out of
I
curiosity.
don't mind being shot over.
Well, I mean,
Little helmets for them.
They used to be done on July 4th, and that's been canned because of the plovers, but it's
This
assumed
date
that
looks-
they'll be gone by that date.
The date looks like it should be acceptable unless
They've
there's
pushed this ahead
extraordinary.
a couple of weeks now since
Right.
that they've
Yeah.
normally been doing.
Right.
Yeah,
So
they
they
should
don't
be
think it'll
going
be an
by,
issue.
they should be going by August unless there's some kind of unusual tidal occurrence that.
Do you know what their coordination is with the
Yeah, I mean, if this,
protection program?
they'll be coordinating with it. And this looks like it would be good. I read it before. I think
Oh.
it's fine.
Yeah, I think
I would, at this time, make a motion that we accept this request.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. All right, old business, powering of soft clams. John?
Okay, so Chris has, I have, and John Courtney have put a resolution together. A lot of this language is from old powering resolution. I'll just go over the high points of it rather than read the whole thing. We have the ability, based on the town code, to alter the season for the taking of soft clams and the methods by which they're taken. Also to issue special permits to do certain shellfishing activities. So basically, we're proposing by this resolution to open 3 areas in Napeague Harbor, east of the art barge to the first houses, west of the art barge around to the creek that goes to Eel Pond, and around Eel Pond, and 2 locations in 3 Mile Harbor, north of Hands Creek Road, north of Hands Creek, around to just before Sammy's Beach access road that takes access to the harbor from Sammy's Beach Road, and south of Hands Creek down to about Duke Drive. That's about 2,600 feet. It'll be a special, this will be eligible to 10 special permits, up to 10 special permits. These special permits will be on a first-come, first-served basis. This resolution, if it's passed, will be posted in the clerk's office and in the newspaper. And the period of the special opening will be July 1st to September 6th. And there'll be a limit on the amount that any permittee can take each day. That will be 2 bushels. And this permit will be for the taking of soft clams by powering only. Daylight hours only, and weekdays only. And I think that's it, unless I forgot something, Chris.
It looks pretty good, John. So it's going to be posted in not this week, but next week's newspaper. So the eligibility to come in and get these permits on a first-come, first-served basis will begin on Thursday, June 27th at 12 noon at the trustee office. Correct. And again, all this will be posted in this resolution in the newspaper next Thursday. Prospective applicants need to have a valid commercial shellfish harvesting license from East Hampton Town and sign the affidavit that they have not been convicted of a violation of this chapter in the preceding 1 year prior to their application, which is that chapter 213.
That's something, well, I don't know if I can discuss with John or Dan. My 89-year-old father, I have a stationman and the commercial license. He says, oh, we can go powering clams. Well, we couldn't go powering clams, and he neglected to tell me that we couldn't even take salt clams. So, you say I had 2 tickets.
That's not a conviction.
Not yet.
So we're bound by East Hampton Town Code on this one. It does state that an individual would have had to have been convicted of a violation. And in that event, then it would be up to the discretion of the court whether or not to revoke that special permit. So that's the way this is going to stay.
So our next court date is next week. So, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to go for a permit then.
When's your court date? What date?
Next week, I think, Monday?
18th.
Not sure.
Well, that remains to be seen. I think the
Monday,
goal of the
June.
trustees was to, abide by the town code and stick within those parameters, and that's what we've done here, and any effect on any individuals we could discuss later date, but that's the way this permit's going to go.
Okay.
In the event you guys vote on it and vote yes, of course.
All right, so, John, did you want to make the,
I'll make a motion that we accept this resolution.
I'd second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, move on.
Thank you, gentlemen, have a nice night.
You too, Jeff. Yeah.
We're working on a proposal to catalog trustee holdings in Northwest Harbor area.
Yes, Francis, if I may, as we saw tonight, there's a lot of important environmental work going on around town. There are often many interested parties to these discussions and project works. We're also facing a lot of continual development in our community. The trustees are often property owners or adjacent property owners to these projects. They may have rights through the Dongan patent to weigh in on certain issues. And we also saw an example tonight where we have somewhat incomplete, somewhat inaccurate information about trustee holdings. Chains of title go back 350 years, and it's very easy to have misinformation brought into a discussion about a property. In working on several environmental projects over in the Northwest Harbor area, it's clear that there's a lot of incomplete documentation over there, and I think a lot of pretty smart people feel that the trustees, have some really strong ownership rights over there. And I would like to present a resolution whereas the trustees will issue a request for proposal to conduct historic research on East Hampton Town trustee holdings in the area of Northwest Harbor. Whereas the goal of this effort is to develop a catalog of properties of interest to the trustees and commonality. Geography, historic documentation, and maps, ownership, and various uses of these properties will be researched and recorded in the proposed catalog. Whereas properties will be referenced from the Legacy Catalog of Trustee Properties prepared by Rick Whalen, the Dongan Patent, historic trustee records, historic town records, and other relevant documents. Whereas properties to consider will include Northwest Harbor, Northwest Creek, Little Northwest Creek, Barnes Meadow and adjacent creeks, Elwive Brook and Pond, beaches along Northwest Harbor, marshes along the creeks, and roads throughout state, town, and county parklands. So it's a considerable undertaking. There are many parcels involved, but there's just so much important environmental resources there that have, to some degree, been neglected since there's been this contested ownership with the state and some confusion over ownership of some of the parcels. I think it's really important that trustees document this. There's a generation of people that still exist that have some connection and knowledge back to all the historical records, but there's not many people left that really can do the research that's necessary. Guys like Tony Tohill and others are really, coming of age and they're retiring, and there's not really a new generation that have this knowledge. So I think this is a great opportunity for the trustees to start to do what I would call some long overdue research on their holdings. And if we can get this done at a reasonable budget, maybe it's a stepwise undertaking. This is our northwestern boundary, Southampton to the west, Gardner's Bay to the north. It's an opportunity for us to, take a cut at this and get some really good documentation on these areas. And, I'd ask for the board's support to issue the request for proposal in this general scope, working with Chris to clean it up a little bit, get it noticed in the paper, maybe reach out to some local law firms, historical researchers, and see what we can come back with to see if it's feasible to undertake this project.
What are you looking for? Motion to,
Looking for a motion to approve issuing the RFP.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Thank you. I'll work on that with Chris and get back to the board for the next meeting.
All right.
I just think it might be important that the people who respond to this understand that this is a big nut, and it may have to be broken into chunks to be able to afford.
Yeah, but if we can get an idea what the scope is, and then prioritize,
Yep.
I think that's something.
Yeah, we can start budgeting for it each year and expand it as it goes.
Yeah, and new boards will have an opportunity to weigh in, so
Right.
we're not binding future boards,
Mhm.
and start to get a little better documentation of that.
Good.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, protecting the future viability of the Captain Ransom Fund. Were you going to be looking into some stuff on that?
No, you were.
No, I already did that, and you guys shot it down.
No, I didn't shoot it down. I just asked questions. No,
I
I
mean,
would
the
like
money,
to.
the money is there in other accounts.
I'm going to propose we form a committee to do this.
No, it was my suggestion to try and put some money into like every year.
No, putting the money in and where you put it are two different
Yeah,
issues.
no, I understand that.
Well, I think we have a couple of things going on. One is to take some money, or all of it, and put it into an account that bears more interest. Other aspects were to bring money into it from things like selling sand.
Well, the goal, honestly, was twofold. Is right now, we're watching that Rising Fund with each year.
Right.
It's depleting the principal in this account. Now, we're not going to reverse that in one year, but I think if we could be disciplined in, let's say, putting away, I'm going to just throw a number, $10,000 a year, okay, that we put into that Rising Fund with the intention of growing that fund to a point that the scholarships are no longer paid out of the principal, but they're being supported by the interest. And, if there's a change in the way, in the way interest is being, if the economy changes in a way that there's more interest there, it's going to solve the problem faster. But what Francis had suggested with some of our CDs and that is putting them into some different interest-bearing products. The only thing I would say, if we get into that, we better structure some sort of rules and regulations for our own board in terms of the proportions of our assets that we can put into, they're low risk, but they're risk investments. That's all. You know what I mean? That would just
We are
be
limited by law on what kind of investments we can use.
We are limited, but you know what? I've been on boards where we found ourselves upside down. We had an agreement on a board that I was on that we could invest no more than 40% in, let's say, a mutual fund or something that is, it's low risk, but it's not insured. Okay? And we had some board members that were going to try and enhance the income by sort of over-investing. And if you get into a situation where things turn against you, where the market goes down, you can go into where you've got like a negative cash flow on these things, you're losing value. And realize, our goal here is not to make money a lot of times. Our goal is not to lose money. So if we're going to go into some interest-bearing things that are outside those CDs, which are guaranteed, which are insured, we have to do it with open eyes, and I don't think we can afford to put everything into that, because then you really are taking a risk.
Of course.
So why don't we just,
I think that's a good thing for a committee to,
why don't we just make a motion to put $10,000 into the current Rising Fund?
Yep.
And look at the overall picture of finding Now, we went through this once, trying to find a better vehicle to put
Yeah,
all
Francis
the
had
money
good
in.
suggestions. I just, I, at the time, I was just asking questions, Francis. I was in
No, it's
front of,
fine.
I was in front of.
Well, I
It's
think
on
the
your
two
proof.
separate
No,
questions.
no, we just, it kind of like got lost at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah.
And,
Well, I think it's a good idea that a committee get together,
right.
hammer out the parameters we need to address.
Overall, fine.
And research the instruments that are available.
Well, I just had a question. Is it possible, and I'm not a numbers guy, you fund it, and then you earmark, some kayak money, different,
Well, you can do that, but I think it's this pretty simple deal. What we had talked about is
Okay.
taking $10,000 out of the revenues that we get from selling sand at Georgia.
Okay.
Put it towards it.
Do you want to make a motion
I'll
to?
make a motion that we take $10,000 and put it towards the Ricin Fund.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye. And who's on the committee?
That's a different question, is what to do about the money. Yeah. Do you want to try and think about setting up a committee, Francis, or?
Yeah. You got, anybody want to volunteer?
I'll volunteer.
I can't even balance our checkbook, man. Wrong guy. Wrong
I'm
guy.
happy to do
I
it.
volunteer Susan Keeber, she brought it up last meeting.
There you go.
She's not here, so it's unanimous.
Perfect. She's the chair.
Is the board okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so who is it then? I'm sorry.
Jim, Francis, and Susan?
Right, okay, thank you.
Really thought you were going to dive on that.
Yeah, I thought you'd like working with Susan.
He's going to have his hands full with his own one.
I got my hands full with this one.
Yeah. All right, committee reports, beaches. Property of Rainer located 85 Western Road, Suffolk County Tax Number 301-15-5-14.1.
Okay, there's two properties. We may as well do 16.2 at the same time.
Okay.
All right. This is Rayner. They're over at the east side of Georgia Gut. There's two properties there. They've got a stone revetment. We did the sand dredging this year. They did the usual cover up they did the usual covering up of the revetments. The work was, I got to tell you, the work really looks great. If you guys want to check out photographs of it.
They do a nice job every
Yeah,
year.
no,
Put it down there, it really looks good.
and if, these pictures don't really do it justice because it actually has grown in quite a bit. I'd like to make a motion to close these two permits.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Okay.
All right, property of Kennedy located at 40 Association Road, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-201-1-10.1.
Okay, this is another property that has a stone revetment. The work was done back in March. It's growing in quite nicely. In fact, actually, the sand is beginning to accumulate around the sand fencing quite well. I do have pictures here if you want to look at them. Again, I'd like to make a motion to close this permit out.
Yeah, I was down there like last week, it looks really good.
Yeah, nicely done sand fencing.
So, second?
All in favor?
Quick question. Now, I applaud the people that are doing maintenance on their revetments, but how about all the people that aren't? Or do we send them a letter? To remind them?
We should reach out, Brian, it's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We should all be working together
We've
on
talked
this as a
about doing,
community.
we know who the waterfront property owners are. We've talked about sending them a letter with a copy of our new sand laws, the sand fencing laws, to kind of encourage them a little bit.
How do we make that happen, Jim?
Just a matter of sitting down and writing a letter.
We've been skulking around your property and we noticed.
Yeah. We're driving,
Well, I wouldn't start
driving along the.
so I wouldn't start the letter with that. So anyway, Kennedy, we approved.
Okay, 101 Lily Pond Lane, Suffolk County Tax Map, 301-13-12-6.2. Those
Okay.
have permit.
Okay, this is another sand revetment, and I have pictures of the completed project. Maybe you sent them this one. This one looks fine. It's the same contractor as Kennedy.
Is this the one Bill looked at?
No.
No, this isn't that weird fence.
No,
This is
actually,
really
that
nice.
one there has since removed that fence, and I've asked them to come back to and put the appropriate fence in. Anyway, this one is complete. I'd like to recommend that it be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Georgia Ponds, 26 LaForest Lane, Suffolk County Tax Map, 301-012-5-3. Application for Phragmite management, buffer restoration, and fill an existing man-made pond.
We mentioned this at our last meeting. This property, for years, was cleared right down to the water. In the last few years, I think they've let it grow in a bit. There's a lot of Phragmites sitting out in front of the place. That's the only thing that truly concerns us. But there is a significant revegetation plan in play here. I really would not like to move on this because I have an issue with the filling in of this pond, which, by the way, it's allegedly a man-made pond, but I do think, if you look at the area, I do think that this thing may have been man-shaped, but I think it was a wetland. Yeah. I think it was a wetland to begin with. Maybe if they're willing to keep that, they really could make something nice there. It's like perfectly round. It's like an eyeball. But I think they could do something nice there. Keep in mind, this property collects an enormous amount of water. If anybody wants, here's the file on that. It collects an enormous amount of water that runs through this property, which is a good size, and some other properties. That pond actually functions as somewhat of a biofilter now. The idea of filling it, I'm not thrilled with. I'm hoping maybe we can convince the applicant to keep it. I've spoken to Billy Hayjack from the village. He concurs. What I would like to do is table this, let the village be the lead on this one, because there's a significant amount of work that's upland, that's sort of outside of our jurisdiction, and then weigh in with the village in that process, and then vote on this at the end, after they've settled with the village.
What's their reasoning for wanting to fill in this pond? Are they given a reason?
Not really given a reason, because the thing is, they're revegetating the area, most of the area where the pond is. So, other than perhaps they may see it as some sort of a mosquito pit, or that, I don't know. But I'm hoping we can get to some compromise. I think it would make for a better project.
There's probably some other aerial photographs available in a couple that they list there, too.
But anyway, it's going to be a little while before I think this is going to be ready for a vote on our end.
All right, Cove Hollow Farm Road, Suffolk County Tax Map 301-12-10.5, revisions to the proposed planting plan.
Okay, this is one, who's this one? This is 25 Cove Hollow Farm Road. I think it's Marks, maybe the applicant. This is one that has, their application to us is to cut Phragmites. But prior to this, there was a violation of the scenic easement that they are settling up with the village. They're still tweaking that. And again, I would like to hold this out until they've settled up with the village. I think they have, I just haven't gotten anything in writing to that effect. So I'd like to hold that one over till the next meeting.
Okay. Move on to administrative, payment of the bills.
Yeah, we got Napeague Lazy Point request from Marilyn Badkin.
Okay, I don't have there on this one.
I think that was a,
Oh, I removed that and she hasn't returned or notarized properly written.
She has not?
The father's very ill.
Okay,
They're in New Jersey. I got it out to them. I ran it by Mr. Carrillo.
Okay, so this isn't ready to do anything?
No, that's
Okay.
why I just took it off.
So let's leave it.
Yes.
You've got an old version there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 5 o'clock today, I took it.
Okay, payment of the bills, Allstate sign and plaque, $59.95. East Hampton Star, $193, help wanted for pump out operator. And Optimum, $133.22.
I'd like to make a motion to pay the bills.
And I'd like to also mention, I'd like to also mention that we hired a new pump-out operator. The committee met with him, and he's...
Penny Fish?
Great candidate, yeah. Yep, so he's
I didn't
excited.
realize he was actually hired.
Oh, yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Wasn't that, oh, I'm sorry.
The committee.
I knew that there was an interview, I didn't.
I shook his hand and said, welcome aboard. So I apologize, you know.
Do we need to retroactively
You want
vote
a
on that?
motion? Sorry.
Has anybody started his,
Yes, we sent him to Sid after, I'm sorry, Susan can tell us.
Training is,
Yeah, when that was said, yeah.
oh, he has to have training at Michael's. with all
Oh, no, that training we need to set up at the office.
Safety
Absolutely.
trainer.
pathogens. Do
Yes.
they have to do CPR? CPR training? I know they have to have blood.
He has
drawing.
spent a life on the water,
I'm
and
not sure that you necessarily want that guy that shows up to pump your
I don't
holding
want
tank.
anybody, anybody.
Oh, CPR, I think that might be...
so again, I'm sorry, when the committee, we maybe were a little zealous, you know, we really liked him a lot, and we didn't want to let him slip away.
that's okay.
Yeah, he's getting,
No, I think it's great that
Yeah.
you did that.
And Sid has done that one, is Sid?
He's going
Oh,
to,
yeah, he's
Sid's
ready.
gonna train him.
Yeah, he's going to train
So
him.
we're gonna work, I mean, we're gonna work.
Maybe we should, when Sid's done, we should maybe recognize him for all of his, I mean,
done a
he's
really good
been
job for a long
here for
time.
quite a long time.
Absolutely, I like that.
The new guys in the
Have him come
process
in
now,
and,
we have to get all
yeah,
the
thank him, would be nice.
technicalities out of the way.
did we get a motion to pay the bills?
Yes.
Wait, Jim made a motion.
I'll second.
You second?
All in
Okay.
favor?
Aye.
Financial report for month ended April 30th.
I had an opportunity to look at it. It appears to be in order. We addressed the Rice and Fund issue, so without...
Yeah, I don't know, after the comment you made earlier that you can't balance your check, I'm really not sure. I always thought you were the guy. I always thought you were.
I know.
know.
And you know what the funny thing is? In a few more months, I'll be gone, and I almost pulled it off. But no, it looks in order, and I do make a motion that we accept it.
Second.
All in favor?
That was funny.
Okay, and renewal of certificate of deposit ending in 6683.
I make a motion, we renew.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, does anybody have anything else?
So,
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
yep.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Get home safe.